Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of Rimworld Odyssey. Last time we left off, after lifting off, we finally built a small gravship and launched it to have Brian, Nelgraf, Reno, River and Alex escape the Scarlands. Today I can reveal where we are going to land to build our next, hopefully less challenging colony, and many of you have guessed or suggested it already, we are going to the Grasslands. Yes, I know, a lot of you were also very interested in the Glowforest, and it is definitely an intriguing biome. However, narratively, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to escape the Scarlands, only to willingly pick a place that is shrouded in permanent darkness and only grows fungus. Yes, our taxonomist Brian would be very tempted by the Glowforest, I think, but perhaps more so as a travel destination, not as a permanent place of residence. The Grasslands, meanwhile, promise vast plains perfect for farming and keeping animals. Yes, there is a risk of droughts, but overall it seems much more suitable as a home, at least at this stage in the playthrough, which is still comparatively early. Now, the tile I have chosen here features a small creek that could help us generate power with watermills and can also be used to fish. It is also mostly flat terrain, but what little rocks and hills there are have marble in them. Maybe that's good for making art later. Most importantly, unlike some other grassland tiles with water on them, this tile is far enough away from our former polluted Scarlands home, so we will not have to battle with acidic smog. And so, let us land and explore our new home. Now, the landing is unfortunately a bit rough. Our now 14-year-old pilot River accidentally disengaged the grav engine a little early, causing some minor damage to our ship. You can see it here, the pilot console, the fuel tank and the grav engine are a little worse for wear, but overall nothing too terrible. So, much more importantly, let's take a look at the area around us. Lots of grass, of course. A small creek is running roughly southwest to northeast. Rich soil is abundantly available along its edges. A few more spots are scattered around the map, and I have picked a landing spot right in the middle, where we have several patches of rich soil not too far away from each other. The map also features plenty of steel, some mineable and some in the form of old structures. Now, immediately upon landing, Nelgraf also suffers another mental break. That awful ideology of his still makes him hate his genetic drug dependency, something we should strive to fix soon. We then begin settling into our new home by chopping some wood. Trees are not exactly abundant in the Grasslands either, but perhaps a bit more frequently available than in the Scarlands. Our animals at least have plenty of grass to feed on, and Goat Lemon Sprinkles also gives birth to another male, but since we now have food in abundance, we're keeping it and name it Peter, as always after a generous channel supporter. With the first few logs of wood then harvested, we fill the gaps in a small ruin near the landing site. This will be our research lab, something we want to continue as soon as possible, and ideally at full speed. Afterwards, we can watch Alex take a swim in the small creek. This is a new type of recreational activity, and it does not give our pawns the soaking wet mood penalty that they would otherwise get for walking through water. On the research front then, we start tree sowing. With lots of fertile ground, we should be able to see some good results there, since steel is still comparatively rare, that is until we unlock deep drilling. River then places a table scavenged from a nearby ruin, and we've got the beginnings of a small camp setup, still outdoors, but that'll be corrected soon. For now, our teenager can go research, while Reno and Alex deconstruct some nearby steel structures. Obviously, we want to get the essentials up and running quickly, power, a stove, that sort of stuff. With a visitor in camp, who sadly does not have anything to trade though, Alex then builds the first wind turbine in the evening. This is one of the main benefits in the Scarlands. The wind is almost always blowing, making this a very reliable power source. Our first night is then spent sleeping underneath the stars, and on the next morning we construct a stonecutter's table to reduce our need for steel even further here in the early game. It is also high time that we start planting some crops. A medium-sized rice field will be enough in the beginning, but we'll likely switch to something less labor-intense once the colony has been set up a bit further. More steel is also coming in from a sizable ruin to the northwest, enough to facilitate the construction of an electric stove and a light for our research lab. With that, we have the absolute necessities in place and can spend a few moments repairing our ship, while Brian also begins stone cutting to make the materials for a small kitchen. And so, day 2 in the Grasslands comes to an end. We quickly construct an end table for extra comfort in our bedrolls, and then have our pawns get some rest. On the following day then, it's time for a slightly larger base building project. I haven't made any plans for the eventual layout of our colony just yet. It likely won't be this, but for now we need a place to hide and a roof over our head, and this should serve us well. As you can see, it takes us almost an entire, otherwise thankfully uneventful day to build our walls out of sandstone, and we even have some left over for a few shelves and a horseshoes pin. On the next morning, Brian plants some heelroot. He is the only one with the required plant skill of 8 or higher, and we soon follow things up with some psychoid to still Nelgraf's genetic appetite. Unfortunately, at this point Randy seems to have enough of the peaceful base building and sends a group of man-hunting hares our way, and while they may be among the least threatening animals in the entire game, we are sadly nowhere near prepared for a group this large. So we scramble to move our entire critical infrastructure into our shelter by the ship. We don't care about the research speed penalty at this point, we only need to survive. Alex quickly lays a power conduit so that we can cook, while River runs to grab the kneel pillow from the lab, but she's not quite fast enough, and we let a few of the animals into our base. Now, thankfully, it's only a small handful, but we only have River, Alex, Nelgraf, and of course Brian's Colossus Toad Heezer to fight them, and their armor and weapon loadout are in need of some serious improvements. Nonetheless, we eventually emerge victorious, but our melee fighters suffer a few injuries that will now need tending. And so begins a rather uneventful stretch of hunkering down behind our stone walls, while the mad bunnies roam around outside. Our farm animals will thankfully not get attacked by them. Now, we do have everything we need to survive for a few days in here. We can even build a second research bench to make up for the research speed penalty we get from putting everything into one room. Apart from that, though, we just lay low and hope for the best. Teenager River, however, has different plans. It seems like the perfect time for a rebellion, and with our youngest deciding to go on a psychoid binge, we finally need to intervene. Not only do we risk losing our supply before we can make more, which could have potentially troubling results for Nelgraf, but River also risks the chance of addiction and overdose, not to mention that she is of the same ideology as Nelgraf, so this drug binge would actually bring her mood down in the long run. So we have Itakin Reno put River in time out, if you will. This ends the mental break, and perhaps we can now also put some sense into her by converting her away from what is definitely a troubling belief system and bring her to the Stars of Som, our spacefaring ideology, which should suit our up-and-coming pilot a lot better. Now, despite a second research bench, Brian does not really enjoy his current living situation and therefore decides to hide in the very place that makes him unhappy. I'm not sure what it is with mental breaks in this series, but our pawns sure have some interesting ideas about what's going to help them feel better. Brian's ex-lover Alex therefore begins talking to young River about her ideology, but this could take a few days. Reno makes meals for everyone. Thankfully, we have plenty of potatoes still stockpiled in the ship, and at night, one of the eggs we still had in there also suddenly hatches, and we get to name another chicken, Suko, I hope I pronounced that correctly, a female that we will keep and have join the others as soon as the hares have left. To improve our mood, a psychic soothe comes in just at the right time, and a few hours later we also receive a quest. 2 desperate refugees are begging for help and want to join us for 14 days, and I am tempted to accept. Feeding and housing them won't prove too difficult, I think. However, we will of course not tell them to come right over unless we want them to get mauled by hares. And so instead we just keep hanging out inside our small shelter. In the early afternoon a mad turkey joins the party, but that doesn't really change much. Eventually Alex suffers a day's mental break because the hideout here is not exactly fulfilling her greed, but I suppose as long as she stays inside we can live with that. Sadly, she also seems to rub off on River, who joins the days a short while later, and thus becomes inaccessible for any conversion attempts for now. On the next morning, most of the hares have thankfully left, but a few are still here, and with our fighters indisposed, I would prefer to wait until they're all gone. That gives us enough time to unlock tree sowing and to continue with complex clothing, so that we no longer need to scavenge what we can to clothe our people, and a few moments later the last wild animal has vanished, and we can move our furniture back to where it belongs. The lab here is getting a bit cozy, but trust me, it still works as intended. In the evening, our goat Salonic then becomes confused. That's because she has unfortunately reached the end of her lifespan and has developed dementia. Now, we could wait until she comes to her senses, but she might have wandered off to the other side of the map by that point. And, well, she is going to die soon anyway, so Nelgraf won't have any issues with putting her out of her misery a little early. On the following morning then, we bring in our first rice harvest, just in time as our food supplies are slowly dwindling, and we also receive a quest from the Empire that we are swiftly going to decline. Several groups of hostile Itakin are not something we want to attract if we can help it, especially not for these kinds of rewards. With the rice harvested and replanted, we then also start planting a large field of corn, which takes a lot longer to mature but also yields a lot more, and in rich soil it is actually a good alternative if you want your pawns to not spend as much time in the fields. We also have Brian chop some wood in the afternoon, and our stone block production also continues, because I think it is high time that we build a proper pen for our animals. Roped up like this, our chickens cannot lay eggs, and none of the animals will mate with each other, which of course severely reduces their usefulness. The wood, meanwhile, is used to construct a butcher table in the evening, as we need to slaughter Salonic, and perhaps a few other animals soon too. On the following morning then, we watch as Reno approaches a wild bison, a new animal in the Odyssey expansion, and he intends to tame it. Mechanically, bison work very similarly to buffalo, but in the Grasslands they are a bit more common from what I can tell. Either way, Reno's animal handling skill of 15 yields quick success, and we welcome Dacanian, I hope I pronounced that correctly, into the colony as a female bison. Of course, though, we want to pair her up with a male, and once more Reno is swiftly successful, taming Jeremiah after the patron supporter of the same name. After a short while, all animals are then moved into the pen and we can finally remove the hitching spot, which promptly results in our chickens laying all their eggs. With that project completed, Brian and Alex can now start sowing some trees. Poplar trees are the best option we have in the Grasslands in terms of wood per day, although planting them all will likely take some time. Nelgraf then suffers another one of his already usual mental breakdowns. Once again, his addiction is the reason. But other than that, we make it into the evening unscathed, and can now put down 2 more bedrolls and accept the refugees who asked for help a few days ago. They arrive and we quickly examine them, and since they'll be staying for a while, we will also give them new names. First, we have Alexander, named after patron supporter Alexander Schultz, a dirt mole with a passion for mining and crafting, but also a jealous, creepily breathing nudist. His dirt mole xenotype also makes him not so suitable for outside work during the day, but he can hold his own in a melee fight should he need to. Joining him then is Choco, who seemingly likes art and combat, and especially the latter is rather useful. Her tortured artist and misandrist traits are not particularly great, but I think we will manage with both of them. Both Alexander and Choco are also part of an ideology that restricts drug usage to medical cases only and endorses child labor, so another reason for young River to not exactly be elated. Now the two of them can get to work immediately. Choco starts disassembling some steel ruins, while Alexander mines a steel vein nearby, although not for long, as Randy sends us our first raid on this map tile, and unfortunately it's waster pirates and drop pods landing right in the middle of our bedroom. Now, thankfully, this type of raid means it won't be quite that many of them, but still, this could get interesting. First things first, we'll set up a melee choke point here by the door, and then have Reno use his animal war call ability to mobilize the bison. As an Itakin, he can use 2 charges of this ability every 15 days, so it is a costly thing, but probably worth it, in this case especially, considering that our 2 latest recruits will take a moment to get over here to help. Brian also dispatches his Colossus Toad Heza, while Alex holds the door with her Thrumbohorn until the animals arrive to take over. As you can see, both Brian and Alex have taken some unfortunate hits. In Brian's case, that would have actually been avoidable with better positioning, but on the bright side, the first attacker is down already, and our enemies seem to be hitting each other with friendly fire too. Eventually then, it only takes 1 more casualty for the other 2 to flee. The only issue, there's only one way out, and our Bison, Decanion and Jeremiah are not yet done with their rampage. And so it actually ends up taking a few hours until we send Alex in to intervene. One of the Bison has unfortunately also been downed due to the prolonged fighting, and to make things even worse, Reno now suffers a mental break because he wasn't the one doing the raiding, and now attacks poor River in the gravship. After slaying the last enemy, Alex is hot on his heels, trying to restrain him and also manages to do so, but not before our Itakin lands one nasty blow and rips River's right ear right off. Who knew he had such a violent side to him? Thankfully he is now pacified, but it will take a little while to restore order here, I think. So, to better take care of the injured, we free Reno from prison immediately, even if that means another mental break is likely. But he is still our most competent doctor, and the injuries to Brian in particular are somewhat serious. As you can see, we have also captured the one enemy who survived the entire ordeal. Let me know what you think we should do with her. She could be a great addition with a melee skill of 14 and a medical skill of 11, but she is another dirt mole, her traits are really not that great, she is part of a supremacist raider ideology, and her level 12 mining skill would mostly go to waste on this map. The open door then also lets 2 crows in who would like to get into our food supply, but Choco and Alexander are vigilant and take them down quickly. Now, while we tend to the slightly less seriously injured, Brian also comes down with an infection, so it's time for some more treatment at the hands of our Itakin doctor. Hopefully herbal medicine will be enough, otherwise we might need to upgrade to the good stuff. A few hours later, with the base a bit cleaner, we also receive another quest. A mechanoid relay holds one of the precious graph cores, and it is not too far away. And that means we now have 2 of these locations on the map that we could and probably should visit sometime soon if we want to upgrade our little graph ship further. For the rest of the day, however, things remain quiet. We rest and recover for the most part, and with our first scary situation in the Grasslands dealt with, I think it's time to make the cut for today and to transition over to some lovely fan art. I had actually hoped to be able to fully convert our teenage prisoner River today, but her mental break and the raid threw a wrench into that plan, so we'll hopefully get around to it next time, which would then also give us our 3rd pawn with the Stars of Som ideology, allowing us to finally assign a moral guide and to start pushing this belief system a bit more onto our other colonists. Until then, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And of course, if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or become a channel member or Patreon supporter. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.